All right. This is who stayed to learn how to brew beer. Don't mind if I my mind's still hung up. Someone just gave me 28 cents change and 4 nickels and 8 pennies. I thought that was weird. So dumb. I'm still thinking about that. Anyway, let's learn how to brew beer. My name is Derek Gallinosa. I am the head brewer of Abnormal Beer Company, as well as the beer curator for the Cork and Craft restaurant. And also I teach at San Diego State University. I do a 6-week course twice a year, and that is marketing craft beer. So I just basically teach marketing concepts and apply them to craft beer. We'll get to the questions. I heard you guys have a few questions, but just also raise your hand during the presentation if you have anything. You could stop me. So Abnormal Beer Company, let me just tell you a little bit about the businesses. So we're located inside the Cork and Craft restaurant. We started in April, the beer company started in April 2015, even though the restaurant started in September 2014, so we're a little bit behind the restaurant. We have a 10-barrel brew house, which is, each barrel is 31 gallons. And just, so a 10-barrel brew house is really small. If you compare that to something like Stone Brewery right here, they have a 120-barrel system, or New Belgium has a 250-barrel system. So very small. Very boutique. So we started with 80 barrels of fermentation capacity, 4 tanks, and just recently, after 6 months, we received an investment to expand 5 times our size to 440 barrels of fermentation capacity. So we'll be able to just reach more people and be a little bit more experimental. And also, we were named Best New San Diego Brewery 2015 by Thrillist. And we're involved with many collaborations. My definition of Abnormal Beer Company, we're just like a big experimental brewery that makes wacky stuff. I don't want to be known as an experimental brewer. I just want to take what people have, that mindset that they have at the restaurant, where they're taking the food in and they're thinking about what they're eating, who's making it, where it's made from, the ingredients. I want that to be brought over to the beer side. And I want them to know what hops are in there, what grain, what processes was taken to make what they're enjoying and thinking about. So I just want that. That's, to me, what Abnormal Beer Company is, just the mindset brought over to the beer side from the wine and the food portion of the business. Many collaborations, like I was saying. Who's here from San Diego? All right, there's a few. All right. I was wondering if you would know all these, but so Monkey Paw, which is downtown, Green Flash, which it's a national brand, Alpine, the Brewery, Stone, St. Archer, Council, J. Wakefield, which is down in Miami, and the Lost Abbey, which was done just 2 days ago. So these are the recent collaborations that I've done with local and non-local breweries, and I find collaborations as a learning experience, just like everything else. I mean, you guys here to learn from each other. I do that in the brewery with other brewers and learn from them, and they learn from me, and we just kind of together build up this industry. Here's a picture of the brewery. So you see the 4 tanks right there, and then the brew house there on the left. And we'll get into what happens in here, but a few more pictures. So that's the brew deck right there. That's actually the first brew that was done on the system back in, I think it was like February or March of last year. So super excited to get back in there. This is graining out, so beer actually comes from malt, which you have to dispose of. So you have to grain out, and we have a farmer that picks it up, and he will feed it to cattle, but he was using it as mulch and kind of adding back minerals to his land. Here's hops, one of the other ingredients of beer, and this is this device right here. It's kind of a bird's eye view, but after the boil, which I'll explain later, it goes through a pound per barrel of whole leaf hops, and what that does is that liquid right there it's about 205 degrees, and by running it through a filter of these whole leaf hops, it's just stripping away all the oils and creating aroma and flavor without adding too much bitterness, which I'm all about. We're all about flavor and aroma with the beer. And also we do a little bit of a barrel. Actually, this is the only barrels I have, or we have. But they're ready. That was taken last year. We have an Imperial Oatmeal Stout, and we placed them in Pappy Van Winkle barrels, which are very hard to come by. Someone knew it, right? Yeah. So those are very hard to come by at the time. We were the only one in San Diego that has it, but now there's one other brewery that has a few. And everyone asks, hey, if you have any extra, come on, throw it our way. But we got 4. If we had like 50, it still wouldn't be enough. So, as everyone's asking you for favors. The Cork and Craft, that's the restaurant that Abnormal Beer Company is inside. So it's an upscale new American restaurant. We apply French techniques to new flavors. We have an in-house winery and brewery, and 40 beer taps. We do monthly beer dinners, and those collaborations that you saw are mainly for the beer dinners, where we get to debut them there to whoever buys the tickets, and then it goes out to the public and be served at our bar immediately after, but they get first dibs on trying that new beer. And we're also voted Best Brew Pub in San Diego 2015 by West Coaster Magazine, which is a local beer periodical. Here is the dining room right here. It's set up for one of the beer dinners. They normally don't have communal tables like that, but this is a cool picture, so I decided to put it on. Here is our chef, Chef Phil Esteban. Really great background as far as the restaurants I used to work in across the nation. And he's plating up one of the beer dinners, one of the courses, which we serve to about 50 to 60 people. Here's some of the food, making you guys mouth water. Luckily, this is the last thing, so you could go out and go eat. So it's basically edible art, in my opinion. So it just looks really nice. We hire a photographer, so it looks extra nice. All right, let's get into beer. What is beer? So beer is a fermented beverage using malt, hops, yeast, and water. Those are the 4 main ingredients. You could add additional ones, but this is what beer is: malt, hops, yeast, and water. And up until, I forgot what the timeline is, yeast was not considered one of the ingredients because it was just naturally in the air, and that's what inoculated the wort or unfermented beer to turn it into beer. So yeast wasn't discovered till later on as the 4th ingredient, but we'll go through the process. So here's the history of beer. Just a brief history. So beer has been discovered through chemical analysis in clay pots 6,000 years ago in the area of Sumeria, which I believe is southern Iraq right now. 3,900 years ago, oldest written found recipe. It was a recipe, it was a poem that was supposed to be presented to the goddess of fermentation, which was Ninkasi, the goddess of fermentation. In 1000 AD, hops were first used in the brewing process to make the beer last longer, and also for its flavor and bitterness qualities. January 16th, 1919, Prohibition begins, and that just totally destroyed America's brewing industry. There was about 4,000 breweries, or 3,000 to 4,000 breweries in America, and it went down to under 30, I believe, after Prohibition. And December 5th, which to me is like a personal holiday because it gave me a job, and I really celebrate that every year. The 21st Amendment was ratified and repeals Prohibition, which was the 18th Amendment. And now from then on, breweries slowly started to pop up, and in 1965, Anchor Brewery begins in San Francisco, which unofficially started the craft beer revolution. And what is craft beer? Craft beer is small, independent, and traditional. Small, less than 6 million barrels sold per year. That's a huge number. It says small, but like we produce, I would say we're maxed out at like 4,500. So that's small in quotation marks. Independent, less than 25% owned by a non-craft brewery. So it can't be a huge conglomerate or someone that's basically like Budweiser, Miller, or distribution companies like you've seen have been purchased over purchasing breweries in the last year or so. So less than 25% owned independently. And traditional, products that derive from traditional and innovative ingredients. So flavored malt beverages, such as like Mad Dog 2020 and Four Loko, and those don't count. It has to be the traditional ingredients. Craft beer in America, there's over 4,200 craft breweries, and it's rising. It seems like every day there's a new one in America. I just came back from Philadelphia where they had 12,000 attendees for the Craft Brewers Conference. It was insane to see that's what the industry is now, whereas 2 years ago it was just above half that. And out of those 42, in addition to those 4,200, 44 are non-craft. So you see how many craft breweries there are in America, but yet it only has a 12.2 market share. So it's a big fight. And it's from like little guys from us that are producing a maximum of 4,000 barrels, whereas others that are producing millions. And it is a huge industry, $22 billion craft beer industry. So all you tech people, if you want to get in, there's a lot of money in there if you want to create stuff for it and help us out. All right, so how to make beer. The brewing process. Brewing process is kind of like simplified it into steps. So the mash, the lauter, the boil, whirlpool and chill. It's whirlpool, I don't know, I thought it was quite cool. I ran out of space, so added those together. Ferment, carbonate, and package. So this is kind of the brewing process right here visually. And you can see the malt, which we get from maltsters, goes into a mill, which kind of grounds it up and exposes the starches. And then it gets sent into the mash tun, or the mash tank that's right there, with warm water. And the warm water, actually, we'll go back to it. So mixture of hot water and milled malt activates the enzymes in the husks and convert the starches over to sugar. When you get to the lauter, after that, you create the sugar water and you want to separate it from the grain, because if you start to boil grain, it will create a astringency, kind of like if you steep tea too long, you get that like weird bitterness to yourself, and you don't want that. It's an off flavor in beer, so you want to separate as much as possible from the grain, and you do that by the screens that are on the bottom of the mash tun. You just basically separate it and push it over to the boil kettle. The boil does many things. It sterilizes the wort or unfermented beer. It drives off unwanted flavors such as DMS, which produces a cooked cabbage flavor, or cream corn. You don't want that in beer, so you definitely want to drive that off. It coagulates unwanted proteins, so it kind of combines them, makes them fall to the bottom. And then you use hops for bittering at the beginning of the boil. Flavor in the middle, and aroma at the very end. The longer it's boiled, the more the alpha acids within the hops convert over to bitterness units. So like I said before, big on flavor and aroma, so I usually side with the lower end of the bitterness spectrum and just flood it with hops at the very end, because when matching up with food, which is kind of the goal of Admiral Beer Company, you definitely want to have at the level of the intensity of the food, the assertiveness of the food within the beer. So adding that extra complexity. After the boil, we whirlpool it, and that's basically spinning it around and around. So the finished wort is spun in to drive the trub, which is the unwanted solid matter, to the center of the kettle, and then you stop it, and it just falls to the bottom, and then you draw the wort off of the side of the boil kettle. But at that point, it's boiling, and you can't ferment boiling liquid, so it gets chilled through a heat exchanger. It's drawn off the side of the boil kettle through a heat exchanger, instantly dropping the temperature from near boiling to fermentation temperature. So through thin, it's a heat exchanger. Cold water runs one way, hot wort goes the other way, and it goes instantly from 210, 212 down to 66, really fast. Into the fermentation temperature. During fermentation, the yeast is added to the wort, causing the single-cell organism to eat the sugar, and it farts out CO2 and pisses alcohol, is what people say. So the wort now becomes beer, which we get to drink. After that's chilled down, we carbonate it. So we seal it up, introduce CO2 by forcing it in under pressure, and it forces the gas into solution, thus carbonating it. Sometimes people, like for example, there's a brewery down here, Gordon Biersch, he doesn't use a carb stone, he doesn't force in carbonation. Like I said in the previous slide, fermentation produces CO2, so what he does is he kind of just closes it up before it's done fermenting, and it goes back, it has nowhere else to go but back into solution, therefore naturally carbonating it, which is another technique, but really old school, and you have to be highly skilled to do that. And just basically pay attention and know your fermentation, which that person has done. It's kind of like one of the pioneers in San Diego craft brewing is down on Gordon Biersch. And then we package. The finished beer, after carbonated and clarified, is put into kegs or bottles or cans and shipped off to the retailers and into your mouths. So you see the brewing process right here. These are some of the most commonly asked questions. The brew days typically run about 6 hours at Abnormal Beer Company, and what I like to call fermenter to face is about 20 to 25 days depending on the style of the beer. Beer is made to consume fresh. Exceptions would be stronger, darker beers, as well as some sour beers that take well to age and can develop over time, and the flavors could come out a little bit better. So I just realized before coming up here, it's how you guys could do it at home, rather than just explain what I do. So I started as a home brewer back in 2007, and it was basically just going to a homebrew shop and buying the equipment. And when I talk about the equipment, let's go back to the brewing process. So I would buy milled grain, and the mash tun, which is basically a big vessel with a false bottom so you could let the wort through, that was a converted cooler. So it was an igloo cooler with a little screen on the bottom. And when I mean screen, it was one of those water hoses for washing machines that you take out the inner tube, and out is on the outside was a threaded, like a stainless steel threaded mesh screen. That was the filter right there. Going into the boil kettle was a turkey fryer I got at Home Depot. And then the cooling part, that was, what was that? I think that was no, that's actually a copper pipe that you put in the, insert into the wort, and you hook up a hose to it, and basically it just heat exchanged by there. Hose water goes into the copper pipe, heat gets exchanged, and hot water comes out, and try to collect that to clean. And then the fermentation vessels, those are glass carboys. Carboys are just like big glass vessels, put an airlock on the top so the CO2 escapes without letting anything go back in. And then as far as carbonation, you would then throw it into a keg, force carbonate it, and then bottle it after that. So you can see, everyone has their own method. All the brewers, I mean, that's the basic equipment, but as far as how to use it depends on who the brewer is, what their techniques, what they learned from when they were trained. So you can see that, if you want to start, you could just pick up equipment from Home Depot or your local homebrew store to get all the science equipment. But it doesn't really take too much to get started. And that's what I did. I saw a friend's dad brew in his backyard and thought that was crazy. Yes, but I was interested, and I bought a book, read it, bought some equipment, started to experiment, and just fell in love with it and just try to create new things over and over again. I mean, all of us in the room are pretty creative people, and that was my creative outlet, was making new beers, sharing it with people, sharing it with friends, giving it to professionals, and seeing how I could get better. So, any questions about the beer making process at Abnormal Beer Company? You have a question? Oh.
Without any microphone.
Yeah, I think
Are there any risks outside of it just tasting like shit?
So there's nothing in beer that could truly make you sick. There's old beer that could make you make every fluid exit everywhere. But no, nothing that'll make you really sick. Sour beer uses bacteria, lactobacillus, and it creates lactic acid. So there's certain, and also there's certain beers like Lambics that take wild yeast from the air and use that to ferment the beer. And that's kind of how they did it back in the day. So by creating that acidic environment within the liquid as well as the alcohol, it's not a great environment to hold stuff like spoilers that will destroy your body. So yeah, it'll just make your stomach upset, but not really kill you. Yeah. No, but I could hear you.
I'm curious on what's the most difficult type of beer that you've made, like where you had to spice up maybe the conventional type of way of making.
That's when I do get experimental. I want to kind of push the limits. And the recent one that happened for that was, so that mash tun, malt has starches which convert into sugar, which convert into alcohol. So therefore, the more starches, the more malt you have, the more alcoholic of a beer that you can create without just adding sugar to it. So the limit of how much alcohol you can produce or how big of a beer you can produce is determined by the size of your mash tun. So recently, I had tried to just max the hell out of the mash tun and see how big of a beer I can make. And that was difficult because every process, or the process after that, lautering, the separation of the wort from the grain, just imagine that vessel usually being half filled but now fully packed, how heavy it is and how condensed it is on the bottom. So the channels in which that wort can fall through are closed and more dense. So you have to back flush it, where you have to push back up and kind of reset the grain bed, and I'll do all these techniques. So making huge beers is a challenge just because the systems are not made to do that, but the end result can turn out great. Yeah.
What was the ABV on that?
That one's only 9, but that was using all grain. Recently did another one that was 11, used a little brown sugar. Yeah. But also you can do it by not lautering too much and doing kind of like a half batch or a 3/4 batch, therefore condensing the sugar then. But I want to make full batches. So a full batch, max out the system. The manufacturer's like, whoa, that's crazy. You fit that much grain in? And like, yeah, you better tell your customers it could be done. So that was basically it, was just kind of making those huge beers, adding different flavors to it. All the other ones are pretty straightforward, but it's when you get to, you want to impress, you want something that stands out, and that's where it gets to be difficult because that's unknown territory from what you're used to.
What's the difference between like this process and like something like a barley wine? Is it very similar?
It's the same process. It's just with the different 4 ingredients. There's 4 different ingredients, but yet how many different beers are there, right? So it's the amount of grain, the type of grain. Do you use roasted malts? Do you use caramel malts? So it all comes from barley, but yet it's either it's dried or kilned or roasted in different ways. And the combination of that grain bill determines the color and the flavor coming from the grain. And then you add in the hops, which they have different flavors. Some, and I like to describe it the same way you like to describe tea. Some are lemon-like, some are citrus, earthy, herbal, floral. Hops have the same characteristics. They're a cousin of weed too, so you could have those characteristics as well. Dank, and even I try to go a step beyond and create water made for each style. So with each style, there's different acidities, different pH within the grain bill because the different roast levels have different acidity levels, and each the hops as well, the amount of hops. So what I do is I change the water up by adding in minerals and salts and acids to get the correct pH based upon the recipe that I built before that. So even the water makes a difference as well. So that's why there's so many different varieties. And with the barley wine, it's a lot of grain, not a lot of roast, maybe just a little touch of roasted malts, but you're just dark fruits and you're not adding a lot of hops. And so it just, with each style, it's just a combination of those 4 ingredients done different ways. Yep.
What's the smallest batch of beer you can make in an at-home situation?
Okay. 5 gallons, I would say. It's kind of like the smallest one. Because that's mainly what most of the homebrew recipes are based off of, is a 5-gallon recipe. Plus, you spend 6 weeks making a beer. You want some beer, You don't want like 4 bottles, and it's not worth the effort. But 5 gallons, and that'll roughly cost, I would say, like after the equipment, just the ingredients, like $30-something, $40. Yeah. So. The initial homebrew equipment was, I Out of the 4 different sets they offered, I got the second level, and that was, I think, like $280. And then you kind of build after that as far as the equipment. That's just to make beer. But to make better beer, you can add on a refrigerator to control fermentation temperature. You can add on a filter to clarify your beer. You can add a kegging system so you can force carbonate rather than carbonate within the bottle and waiting 6 weeks for that to fizz up. So it just all depends, but just to get started, it's about $280, $250, and then you just kind of, build on top of that.
Is there a significant difference in like complexity of like trying to brew trying to brew like a light beer versus a dark beer, or is it like the same amount of time, same amount of ingredients?
Yeah. Same, not different amount of, it's just what ingredients to use. So the only difference from a light and dark beer is mainly the malt. So you may sprinkle in a little bit of a roasted malt, which basically looks like coffee. It's the color of coffee, so you sprinkle in a little bit of that in addition to your regular base malt. And that's going into like recipe building, but the color and the flavor from the grain is determined by the percentage of different malts you use within your grain bill. So do you add some caramel malts to produce a red ale? Do you add what they call chocolate malts because it's roasted to simulate chocolate to create a porter? So it's a combination of all those is what determines the different styles that you make, but same process. Yeah.
When you ask like fruity beer, is that like really flavored through hops, or is it?
Like, what do you mean fruity beer? Like
I've had like grapefruit beer before, that was really nice.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if other things aside from.
Yeah, so those are the 4 main ingredients, but at the end, you can add in different things, different fermentables, different flavors to add on to the 4 main ingredients. So that big beer that I was talking about where I maxed out the system, that was an imperial stout, but yeah, I added, I just added cinnamon, ancho chilies, vanilla, cacao nibs, and Mexican brown sugar. So it was kind of to play off like a chocolatey dessert, which will be sold for those local at Bottlecraft next month. It's their anniversary beer. Yeah.
I'm curious how you develop recipes, especially being a head brewer right now.
Mhm.
Do you like go through and try to create smaller batches, or do you just like create the recipe and then brew each batch and hope it turns out well?
Yes, that. Yeah. So with the experience I have as a home brewer and just having it turn out well, I'm not, like I said, I'm not too experimental as far as a brewer. I know how to make the base styles and play off of that. So, and also it's like a time issue. I don't want to wait. So all the beer that has been brewed out of Normal Beer Company has been just kind of the first run. Make the recipe and keep making it better and better, but I know it'll come out drinkable, and you just kind of take the feedback and make it better. But it's just lucky that we had such a big start that we got people investing in us as well as other people loving us. Yeah. So no practice. Yeah.
Since you said that you kind of have base recipes that you build on, is it possible to do it where you can like create a big batch of the base and then make a few, and then from that you can make like varieties from there by changing it somewhere in the middle of the process? So that way you can get like multiples out of
Yeah.
one big,
Definitely, but it wouldn't be during the middle of the process. It would be at the end. So you have this, say for example, finished stout, and you want to make a cinnamon version, you want to make a vanilla version, a coffee version, and you could just separate it. Like at home, you could separate in different kegs and kind of throw in a little cheesecloth bag of that certain ingredient, let it soak for a little bit, and serve off of that keg or put it into bottles. On the big scale, it's pretty much the same thing. We could, I'll take a keg and I'll open it up safely because they're under pressure, but we have the proper tools and training to open up the keg, throw in some ingredients, let the beer rack over the beer, and have that one keg be kind of a specific variant of the base beer. So it would be after, if you want to make multiple different batches, it would be after fermentation, after the beer is already done, but yet to be carbonated. You kind of have this, in a sense, a blank canvas with other things that you can add on to it. So that would be after fermentation. This is just fruit or what I just mentioned, depending on the style. Yeah.
when you're saying both porters and stouts contain lactose? No, that's.
Hello? All right. Whoa, that's louder. It's the only style that really calls for lactose is a milk stout. But porters and dry stouts, imperial stouts, they typically don't have lactose. And what that is it does add sweetness because it does not ferment. So it adds residual sweetness as well as body. So that's the main purpose of adding lactose is the sweetness in the body. But most of the dark beers do not call for that. It's mainly just milk stouts. Yeah. Yeah. My favorite style of beer is IPA and Lambic, and I guess I just want to make more IPAs, even though they cost more, so the profit margin's not as big. You gotta make some other stuff, but I do love making IPAs. They sell fast, everyone enjoys it. It's nice and refreshing, especially in San Diego. And then lambics, which are spontaneously fermented from the flora that naturally occurs in the air. We don't have the equipment to do that. I would love to make in the future, but it's just such a traditional and labor-intensive process that I'm probably not going to make it, but I enjoy it. It's just like the most expensive beers or lambics from Belgium. But yeah, it's those two, and I just want to make more IPAs. Is what for the second question as far as like how I changed the brewing. I just miss making them. I would say there's a beer that just came out. It's called M2, and M2 was an imperial stout with vanilla, cacao nibs, espresso, coconut, and lactose. And it just tasted like a candy bar, a liquid candy bar. We sold it. That's our only bottle release that we had, and we sold 600 bottles online and sold in 30 seconds. So that was kind of cool too, just to see that. Yeah. Sorry, there's no more. Everyone bought it in 30 seconds.
I'm curious, like, I know I'm about to say it's absolutely sacrilege, but I actually don't like the flavor of hop, and I know there's tons of other varieties of beers, but like, IPAs seem to be like, everywhere, and that's as much as there's tons of really versatility, like tons of IPAs everywhere. What's like another, is hop considered grain or fruit? Or what is it?
It's a plant. Yeah.
So is there like another plant that's like, that people are like working on to like,
Yeah. Do you not like the bitterness or do you not like the flavor?
I don't know, it's hard to say. Like, yeah, the session I had last night, the bitterness was not there at all. It was amazing, but it has that like flavor.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit too. So I think it's just like that aftertaste of that flavor that I just don't like as much. So
Hmm.
I was wondering, like,
So you got the hop forward beers. Mainly want to stick to ones with low IBUs or international bitterness units. Those will have less hops for bittering. As far as the flavor, you want to look for the more maltier beers, red ales, brown ales, porter stouts. They typically have less bitterness, less hop flavor. And some beers that have basically no hops in it are sour ales, wild ales, sour ales, lambics. Those hops inhibit souring the beer. So they just like throw a couple pellets in just to call it beer because you have to have all the main ingredients. But it works against what that style is trying to produce. So sour beers and maltier beers, I would say, are the least hoppy that you can find. Oh, yeah, two.
Oh, I was gonna say, I am interested in the fact that San Diego State has a marketing class for beer.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? Because they got all these cool classes when I graduated.
No, so now you can take it because it's a part of the extended studies program. It's the certificate of business. It's a certificate program for the business of craft beer. So you take 6 or 9 classes, and they span all across the business of craft beer. Some are intro classes to where you learn food and beer pairing, the brewing process, distribution. What's another one? Front of the house, draft technician. So it's kind of a well-rounded course. Well-rounded certificate program, and what that does is it basically is a resume piece for those that want to get into the industry or learn something new to further their career within the industry. So mine just happens to be the most business-like class in there because everything else is like draft technician and all that. And so my final project, I don't like giving any task. I think it's like, people just remember stuff and regurgitate it, and that's it. They are set in teams, and they have to act like they're a marketing team or marketing department within a brewery. And I'm giving them a beer, and I don't tell them what it is. It's always mine, but I don't tell them what it is. They always ask, like, oh, is this so-and-so's? And like, I don't know. So they're given this beer, and they have to bring it to market. They have to write a marketing plan for it. What demographic do they go to? What age group? What location? How they're going to package it? What price? Are you going to do 6-packs? Are you going to do bombers? Are you going to do kegs only? What's your footprint for distribution? So they have to run through those basic things to bring a certain beer to market, and that's basically what their final project is, and what the whole 6-week class that I instruct kind of ends on, is them taking marketing concepts and applying it to craft beer. Yeah, it's fun. We drink.
Are there other alcoholic beverages that are like more or less complex in terms of like creating it that would be maybe a better breakthrough thing to start on to kind of understand some of these like concepts?
A less complicated. So, well, the difference between like a beer and wine license is the brewing part, is the creation of sugars. So when you ferment juices like grape juice to make wine, or other fruit juices to make whatever you're trying to make, pruno, or I don't know if you guys know what that is, like a jail fermented juice that people make in jail. The whole production of the conversion of starches into sugar, so you could ferment the sugars, that is the added step that goes beyond winemaking, where there's a lot of just technical things within winemaking, but there's an added step with creating the sugar. Same thing goes for sake. Sake is not rice wine, it's like a rice beer, because you're taking the starches and you're adding in bacteria to create the sugars in order to ferment. So I would say winemaking, actually, yeah.
You mentioned like
Or cider, sorry. Cider is good. There, that's it. All right.
you mentioned your favorite types of beers, but is there like a particular like brewery other than your own product?
I'm not going to say a brewery's my favorite.
Well, no, your favorite, you said IPA. So
Yeah.
is there a favorite IPA in particular, or maybe number if you can't choose one?
No, I have that list in my head. So my favorite brewery my favorite brewery is Alpine Beer Company, which is over in Alpine, East San Diego. Just make really awesome IPAs as well as good sour beers. So that's my favorite. And as far as my absolute favorite IPA, it's from Kern River, Kern River Brewing Factory or Brewing Company, and they make a beer called Citra. And that is the best IPA I ever had. And you have to win a lottery to get it. And you have to go to like Bakersfield to go buy it or pick it up. So not worth the effort. I just wait for someone to do that for me. Or like, hey, would you like some? Yes, I would. All right, all done? I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.